I am so conservative.
Rationalize in my head. These are things I read.
And I'm going to talk about Willow Creek.
Okay.
Willow Creek, a few years back, had invited.
Remembered at the time when Will Rogers said, I don't belong to any organized religion. I'm a Baptist.
Yeah. I am so conservative. If you didn't jump to conclusions, you might not get any exercise. I am so conservative. And welcome to the Unknown Webcast. In these days of cancel culture, being publicly known as a conservative can bring consequences. Even so, for the safety of our viewers, I have to point out that I really am so conservative I can't turn left even when I'm driving. I want to know and believe what is true. So I am also theologically conservative. I'm willing to change my views if I find they're false. But for those viewers who have a fear of hearing an idea which may lead to actually thinking and testing their beliefs, this is a trigger warning. This is not a safe space for those who may be easily offended by having their ideas challenged or maybe even by our satire. Today is September 8, 2020, and this is broadcast number 206. This is another first-time guest, Dr. Corey Miller, who may also live to regret it. Corey is the president of a campus ministry, Ratio Christi, which is why we are comparing campus ministry with War of the Worlds on today's Unknown Webcast. My name is Don Vino. I'm president of Midwest Christian Outreach Inc. in Wonder Lake, Illinois, which produces the Unknown Webcast. And our senior researcher, co-host, and resident COVID-19 tracker is Ron Hensel, who will introduce the sponsors of today's webcast. And here is Ronnie Baby.
Greetings from sunny Florida, where the palm trees came out, saw their shadows, and now we have 12 more months of summer. Our sponsors for this webcast include World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time has gone. World's End Theology Outlet. And Where's the Outrage? The game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they're white males. Where's the Outrage? And if you enjoy this webcast, or if it really annoys you and you would like to inflict it on somebody else, to ensure your continued access to this program, please go to midwestoutreach.org and click the yellow donate button and contribute as you feel led. And don't forget to subscribe to us on YouTube. Greetings to Dr. Corey Miller, the president of Ratio Christi, or Ratio Christi, or Ratio, or Ratio Christi.
Depending on where you are at in the country, your social location.
Or whether you took Latin in school or not. So
yes. So he also has a book, I believe it's just coming out now, Engaging with Mormons, Understanding Their Worldview, Sharing God's News. So it's like a whole book in itself, just in the title.
I wonder if we're going to get complaints about being Christians shouldn't get engaged to Mormons.
I suppose, but maybe you can. Maybe you can do missionary dating. In fact, Dr. Miller, as my understanding, was himself at one time a Mormon. Isn't that correct?
I was seventh generation Mormon. I said sixth generation in one of my books, and I lied because I was so captured with the sixth gen ancestor and his proximity to Joseph Smith, and spreading the seed. He had five wives and 36 children, of which I'm descendant.
The seventh generation is a biblically significant number. You see it in Matthew, 7 generations from, so to so, so and so to so and so. I forget. So you're really seventh generation. You're born seventh generation Mormon, and how old were you when you decided to stop being a Mormon?
Well, I I had rejected Mormon sociology, not necessarily Mormon theology, because I was sick of the hypocrisy that I had experienced as a child. I grew up in a non-conventional, ideal Mormon home, one that had a single parent, mother was a smoker, definite no-no in Mormonism, fat chance of getting to celestial glory with that, 'cause you're not going to get the temple recommend, and without temple recommend, you're not getting to celestial glory.
And even worse, you didn't go to conventions. So yeah.
Yeah, and I took it seriously. As a child, I was supposed to be baptized at age 8. I did not get baptized because I was experiencing internal contradiction. On the one hand, you are taught, try your best, and God will make up the rest. A little phrase in Mormonism that you think that you've got enough time and that Heavenly Father's a loving Heavenly Father and we'll all eventually make it, and maybe there's some migration between kingdoms and so forth. On the other hand, I learned that, that it seems to be mission impossible, or at least something close to it. But when you get baptized, it's baptismal regeneration, and there's a washing away of your sins, and you get a clean slate. And the question I had is, well, what happens after I be baptized by the proper priesthood, of course? Then what if I sin? Well, check marks on your slate. And I'm thinking, I'm never going to make celestial glory that way. So I decided I would wait until I was 88 years old on my deathbed and beat the system. And over the next year, I struggled because I thought, what if I get hit by a semi-truck or something and failed to be baptized like I should have been? So I capitulated at age 9, continued in church, Sunday school, Boy Scouts, which was really baptized Mormonism in Utah. It was part of the culture, and I believed it, and I didn't have a father, and I always believed Heavenly Father was my sort of surrogate father. I never wanted to throw that away.
Even when you're talking, you're using Mormon lingo and phraseology, and I start getting lost, right? It's like, you don't say the Heavenly Father or God, you say Heavenly Father, like it's his name. And you, or as if you're addressing him in prayer or something,
Mm-hmm.
And achieve. Did you say achieve celestial glory? Is that the phrase you used?
Yeah, but I did not use King James language.
What would?
But yes.
Would it have been different?
Huh?
Would it have been different? I mean, what would you? When you say you didn't use King James language, do most Mormons use King James language?
In our prayers we would.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
So I'm just saying, like.
But there are technical terms. There is Mormonese. That's right.
Mormonese, right.
And like sometimes it's sort of inevitable, but I mean, like we use Christianese, okay, but we get it from the Bible, and so like, where do Mormons get Mormonese from? Book of Mormon?
Well, I think even in the sub Christian culture, we have our own lingo as well.
Right. Most of it's, I think, from the Bible. I hope. Well, like, okay, accept Christ as your Savior, not in the Bible.
Little phrases like "I just pray that," "I just pray that."
Oh yeah.
Evangelicalese. So there are cultural idioms, I think, that we would use in our sub-Christian cultures. But yeah, I think the terminology.
That's every subgroup of anything has that. If you're an electrician, you have a vocabulary that all electricians understand and the non-initiated don't. So it could be religious terminology. It may not be. Same thing with a carpenter, or a football player. There's shorthand for a variety of other things. So you were a Mormon, you became a Christian, and then got engaged in apologetics. So we're kind of going quick trip through that so people have an understanding of you.
Yeah, I maintained my belief in the Mormon concept of God and in Heavenly Father, and continued to pray even though I rebelled against the system, rebelled against my culture, found people who would love me, which wasn't the right direction to go. And when I finally got invited to go to a Christian camp in California, it was on the basis that I could spend the summer at the beach there with a friend. And his dad would pay for us to go to this camp for 1 week, and that was the condition. So I went, and that's when the preacher spoke on hell, and I tell people that scared the hell out of me, and heaven right into me, literally, because I'd never heard about hell before. I mean, you hear about the concept, but no one's really going there. And when I realized how utterly sinful my sin was, it resonated with where I was at. I was on a very bad trajectory at the time. And grace made sense for the first time with that background of understanding sin and its consequences. And so I fell in love with Jesus, God's people. I saw relationship in a different way with God, the divine human relationship, rather than religion, and moved to California my junior year of high school, where I was discipled. It was a set time for me. Came back to Utah my senior year to graduate, and that's when the cultural challenges came for me to reconsider what I had just done, the decision I had just made, perhaps to becoming an apostate in Mormonism, which is very bad news for my eternal future. And so I was challenged to reread the Book of Mormon for the sake of truth rather than just tradition. And I did, and that's when I found it problematic. It resonated in a sense with what I had been taught growing up, that, look, you can't trust the Bible, but it doesn't matter because you have living prophets. But now that the living prophets are gone, if I no longer believe that, what do I do with this Bible with a bunch of holes in it, with the corruption surrounding it? Does God even exist? And if so, which God? And that's what sent me into a trajectory of skepticism for a time, and gave me a passion for truth and landed me in the direction of philosophy and comparative religions, where I'm at today, essentially.
Okay. So you're a believer, and then you got engaged in apologetics as a result of all of that process, and are currently now the president of Ratio Christi, which in terms of Christian apologetics kinds of ministries is sort of the new child on the block, if you will. How long ago did Ratio Christi start?
We're about 10 years old as a 501c3.
Okay. And love the ministries. Of course, several of your associates are friends of mine. I hope that doesn't speak badly of them.
We'll see.
Yeah, we'll see. You can take them to task after we're done here.
No.
So, all right. So we're moving into, by the way, for those, I didn't say this earlier, all of this stuff is, let's see if I can remember how to do this. On the bottom of the screen, oh, there we go. On the bottom of the screen are the links to Ratio Christi, to Corey's forthcoming book, to Midwest Christian Outreach, to where you can donate if you choose to do that, get on our email, that sort of thing. It's all in the description at the bottom. So now the big question is this: as we started on this adventure for this particular webcast, you and I had been talking about campus ministry. And you said the best way to understand it is to think of the War of the Worlds with Tom Hanks as the main character.
Tom Cruise.
Tom Cruise is the main character. Tom Hanks, boy, that would be an interesting one. Yeah, Tom Cruise, the Tom Cruise version. Mm-hmm. Why that version, and how does that equate to the topic of we're discussing today?
Well, yeah, so it's based on a late 19th century narrative by H.G. Wells, a science fiction novel that's never been out of print and was made into movies several times, but thinking about the 2005 rendition in particular. The narrative opens by stating that, humans on Earth had busied themselves essentially with their own lives and their own endeavors at that time, and then the aliens came and plotted the invasion. But in the Tom Cruise movie in particular, it was depicted as though these alien life forms that had, somehow through strikes of lightning had transported themselves into their machines that were buried under the soil for maybe millions of years, for a really long time. And then something triggered it, and all of a sudden, all of these things came out of the earth and all hell broke loose.
Yeah.
And in particular, I'm thinking not about all the worldviews, but the one most recent that seems to be encapsulating America in social media, in politics, in business, in everything. And all of a sudden, we're all experiencing this new thing and it's taking us by storm, as it were, like lightning bolts. Similar to what happened when we all became educated on 9/11 about this thing called Islam. No one in the West, no one in America knew what Islam even was.
Well, most people, yeah.
We quickly learned what it was.
I mean, I've run into a lot of people over the decades who made a study of Islam, but it was very hard to get. Even me myself, how much time did I have to devote to learning all about the Hadith and the Sharia and all that?
Mm-hmm.
Boy, I've worked to get myself up to speed as much as I think I need to now. But yeah, you're right. We were pretty much ignorant until 9/11.
Yeah, there's a clash of cultures that happen, and you get an education really quick. And sometimes it's a good education, sometimes it's not. But sometimes that's how worldviews happen. They germinate for a while, sometimes a long while, and then something triggers one, and it just launches like crazy.
Yeah. So, Don, your mic's off. Let me.
So you didn't like me just waving my hand
well,
around?
I was thinking you could do semaphore or, yeah.
So I was just saying, I think it's been my contention that number one, most people get their worldview by osmosis. It just sort of filters in from the groups that they are involved with, the neighborhoods they live in, the media they watch, the jobs they work at. They hear bits and pieces of things, and it goes unchecked into your brain, and you sort of just assimilate it into your thinking. The other aspect is, I think a fair amount of the church is insulated from culture. I years ago, I used to do a talk called "Leaving the Christian Ghetto." Now, you may be uncomfortable with the ghetto, but it sort of reminds me of a scene in Schindler's List where they're in the ghetto and they're talking about the rats, and one of them goes, "I like the rats," and they said, "Why do you like the rats?" He goes, "Because it keeps the Germans out."
Yeah, right.
So we may see problems within the church, but we kind of are still comfortable there because it keeps the unbelievers' sin out of the church, if you will. Now, how does that play into all of this? Well, I think a lot of these things are not only germinated, but growing in institutions without our knowledge of it. And so as you laid this out, you said there are 4 worldviews really at play here in kind of the grand scheme of things currently. Mm-hmm. 2 of them religious, 2 of them secular, 3 of them evil, 1 of them good. What are they?
So the 2 that are religious would be Christianity and Islam on the global scene. The 2 that are secular would be naturalism and Marxism. And there is some cross-pollination of those that takes place. But by and large, those I think are the 4 dominant worldviews on the global scene right now. And some of them, 3 of them at least, are vying for power in the American universities. Maybe just 2.
2 being?
Well, I would love to say Christianity is one of them, but Christianity is now outside of the castles. We built those things, and much like the alien invaders that came and parasitically hosted on the humans, other worldviews had emerged and hosted on the Christian capital that we had built. And those beginning with naturalism that took over the universities, whose period was 1880 to 1930, and at that point the dust was settling. And now the one that we've seen, like all hell breaking loose in Tom Cruise's movie, is critical theory, cultural Marxism, that somehow the naturalist had created this lab over in the humanities and just left it there for some virus to grow, and now it's morphed and become a Frankenstein that they cannot even control, and now it's even eclipsing the hard sciences.
Frankenstein.
Right.
Reminded me of a line from a movie when you said Frankenstein. Frankenstein. It's like, as you're talking, I'm thinking, okay, naturalism led to relativism, in my opinion. I mean, if I were to just with the broadest possible strokes, if you really want to understand everything, you need to take a course in chaos theory, because there were so many movements and trends. And
I have to double check something, Ron. Can we use the word broad, or would that be misogynistic?
I was hoping you wouldn't go there. but yeah, broad where broad should be broad. Yeah. We have to forget everything we learned from Broadway here. Broadway, okay. So now, yeah. Okay, back to what I was thinking and saying, if I can.
Naturalism was responsible for moral relativism.
Naturalism led to moral relativism, and I would say the weird thing is about critical race theory today, which is one of the main critical theory that's being endorsed. I mean, you've had critical women's theories, critical everything. The main thing about it is that they're anything but relativist. They've got absolutes. We are absolutely a racist culture, and I don't think I think you'd be hard pressed to find a critical theorist who would say, yeah, this whole fascist thing is just relative. They want to destroy us because we are. If they accuse us of being fascist, we are. The American flag is a fascist symbol according to Antifa, right? So we're all fascists, and that's really bad, and it's not morally relative. So how did that get into academia? Well, it got in by way of relativism. It wasn't considered a threat. Nothing was considered a threat except maybe Christianity. That was something that they had to expurgate. They had to get out of the system.
Well, we have written on and done webcasts on Marxism, neo-Marxism, and its infiltration since around 1930, let's say, through John Dewey's how he structured the public school system to gently, gradually lead us to a Marxist society. Now we have it kind of moving from and Christians essentially abandoned the universities in the 1930s and 40s and started Bible college, the Bible college movement. And so now we're kind of seeing the fruits of that. So I spoke with a woman a couple of weeks ago at a place I spoke at, and she was shocked, as you were pointing out, that this seems to have happened so quickly. And I pointed out, no, this is more like a play. You need to understand that it's been a long time coming. When you go to a play, you're sitting in your seat, you see the curtains moving. What you don't think about is how long ago the play was written, who wrote it, how the director then decided to play it out, how they ended up financing the play, all of the sets that would be used in the play, the actors and actresses that would be hired to play the roles of the play, all of the practice and training that went into that, leading up to the moment when the curtains part. All you're seeing is the curtains parting. Everything else had been years, decades in the making. Yeah. Isn't that more accurately what's going on here?
Yeah, I mean, as I said, the dust was settling in about 1930. Remember, if we can look at Harvard as a school of exhibit, I'll actually be at Harvard on Friday reconnoitering that campus. But Harvard was the first university in America 150 years before the United States became a country, 1636. And it had as its motto, veritas, truth. And what they meant by truth was not relativism, truth, as Ron points out. But given that it was the Puritans, all truth is God's truth. There is absolute truth, and truth is objective and knowable. And they were thinking from a Christian perspective as well. So they quickly added within a few decades an extension to veritas, which was truth for Christ and the church. And that lasted 300 years from 1636 to 1936. And that was a telltale sign that the dust was settling, and they got rid of that. And you can't even find the history on their website. But things take a while to germinate ideologically before they come to the surface, before they come to fruition and they start to bloom. And that's what was happening with, cultural Marxism, which left Germany, started in Columbia University, extended onto Brandeis and other Ivy Leagues, and was just there in time for the 60s social student revolutions and protests. And then by the time the 90s hit, many of those students went on to academia. In particular, they went into the humanities, where relativism was given more seed. You still had objective truth in the hard sciences. That's the only place where you could get objective truth, of course, according to naturalism and scientism. But the social sciences came about, and they wanted to claim to be a science. Everybody wanted to be a science at this time. So you got stuck in the humanities and wanted to get out. But while you were there, these seed beds of relativism were taking place, and in particular movements, they flourished. And then there were two things that happened for this just to burst through the seams. In the mid-90s, the ratio of left to right professors was about 2.3 to 1. Which is still significant, but you still had heterodoxy, and you could have debate, and debate was not hate like it's becoming today. And at that time, there was a rapid rise of left to right professors, to the point where today it's 12 to 1 for those getting ready to retire, and 23 to 1 for those under age 40, 27 to 1 in New England, and in some departments like religious studies, 70 to 1. So you get a political orthodoxy. Well, simultaneous with that, it was just, call it coincidental. It fit the times. This stuff started to germinate in the humanities and started to become much more popular. And with the rise of the number of left to right professors, you had the new left that came out of the 60s. Right. The Marxist left that suddenly, just in the last 5 years, as Jonathan Haidt, the atheist, says, if you haven't been on the university campuses in the last 5 years, you wouldn't even recognize it. It's become such a different place.
Yeah. And one of the things that we are watching from the outside of this, and so it makes me wonder how you all function on the campus level, is this idea that you can't even bring up an idea that might cause them emotional pain and duress to think about it. They have to have safe spaces to go to.
Right.
And then if they go home, what how do they prepare for this scary place called the neighborhood, where they might run into other family members who have different kinds of ideas? We have a product really to address that.
This is one of your transparent segues, Don. If debate is hate, then hate is scary. So we're scared, and so our friends at World's End Theology Outlet, your one-stop resource for half-baked heresies, dubious doctrines, and other ideas whose time is gone, they empathize. They want you to know they really empathize with your plight. And they want to help you with it. So after 4 semesters at your small progressive liberal arts college, you're flying home to visit your red state relatives. You remember to bring your emotional support puppies. You packed all your comfort blankets and pillows. You even remembered your adult coloring books, but still, it feels like something is missing. You don't feel safe. What can you do? You need Instant Safe Space. It has patented anti-free speech technology to make you feel safe. It provides you with guaranteed protection from and this last time happened too, trigger words, microaggressions, cognitions, and unwelcome thoughts. There they are. Okay, feel protected, feel safe with Instant Safe Space from World's End Theology Outlet. I've got to do a troubleshooting on that presentation, but there you go. You want to feel safe, and it's just terribly frightening to realize that there are other points of view that differ from yours, no less. So this seems to have this seems to be taking a little bit less, maybe a lot less, now that we have COVID and the riots and everything else. The campus is no longer, it seems to be the vortex of the culture war. It's now moved to the streets. I don't know that maybe it could move back to the campus, but prior to this, I mean, it was like week after week after week, somebody was being persecuted either as a student or as a professor. And
persecuted, canceled, fired.
Canceled, being threatened. We need a little muscle here to get this guy out. He's trying to get into our safe space. And it's bad because even though he's a journalist, he's not actually saying anything. We have to protect this space because we are so fragile, and yet they'll turn around and accuse alleged racists of being fragile. I see, we call them snowflakes and buttercups, and they call us fragile. That's the state of the rhetoric as it stands.
So my question is, because I'm just kind of an undereducated country boy that likes to play in this field of apologetics and philosophy. Is it safe, talk about safe, to assume, if it's ever safe to assume anything, that Christianity's losing ground as it's leaving these institutions? Naturalism was settling in to those institutions. Marxism was being introduced in those institutions, and now have come to fruition as Christianity continued kind of leaving the thought-shaping aspect of culture. Is that generally how you see things happen?
In the academy, you had two sides that were, in one sense, in an unholy alliance marshaled against Christianity to Christianity's removal, essentially, at least from a traditional standpoint. And that is the hard sciences on the one hand, with scientific naturalism there, and then postmodernism, and in many respects, relativism in the humanities. And both of those two were at odds, but they stayed in their own ground. In postmodernity, we think of the statement by Richard Rorty that, knowledge is what my peers will let me get away with, or truth is that which my peers will let me get away with. I'm sorry. But as others have said in sociology, that knowledge is a social construction of reality that is constructed by language. So language games circles the wagon train on that. So you've got a postmodernist element to the university, and you've got a modernist element to the university. And those two are now vying for authority, and the postmodernists are starting to take charge. They're the new emperor on the throne, as it were. And so it's interesting to see, where that battle is going. But it's not helping Christianity. Christianity's still on the outside looking in, as it were. You have to have, campus ministries and people going covert more and more into academia who are Christians, because you're not welcome there. The modernists, what we have in common at least, is that knowledge is possible, truth is objective, only scientific truth, of course, but with the rise of postmodernism, even scientific truth is not objective. It is brought about by agenda. Everything's got an agenda and power behind it.
Even math.
Privilege and power.
Right. Even math. 2 + 2 might not be 4. It might be 5.
So what I find simultaneously alarming and gratifying is the fact that there are liberals, atheists, liberals, and others who are really starting to feel the heat of this. They are not going along with the absolute relativism, what was once called about 25 years ago. It's not even really. It's moved on. It was called dogmatic pluralism, I think, in the early 90s, where Christianity, the method of stifling the Christian voice was by demanding that Christians be more pluralistic and not make so many absolute truth claims. Well, now that's been replaced by people who are making absolute truth claims that are in direct opposition not only to Christianity, but to all the canons of Western civilization, all the canons of Western knowledge. And it's not even really just Western knowledge. I mean, to say that the correspondence theory of truth is some kind of Western invention is ludicrous. I mean, how did the Chinese get along for so many thousands of years without the definition of truth as that which corresponds to reality? They didn't. They pretty much have this, functionally, they had the same definition of truth that the rest of the world did. But now it's being accused of being enlightenment, and now we're post-enlightenment. And in any case, what you're seeing is, you just made a reference to 2 + 2 = 4. And you probably have been following the tweets of James Lindsay on this, I take it down, when you...
Yes.
Yeah. So in other words, here's a PhD in mathematics who is literally arguing with other mathematicians. I don't know if they're all PhDs, but I think a lot of them are, who are trying to argue from alternative alternative approaches to mathematics, in which you could technically say, if you are very careful to clarify what you mean, the 2 + 2 = 5. In these alternative systems, we're talking about so many clarifications that by the time you're done clarifying, you've really explained why 2 + 2 really isn't 5, really.
But here's my question, because here's where the rubber meets the road. Always, when you ask someone a question, you want to ask them a question that will demonstrate what they actually believe, not what they claim they believe. How they react tells you what they really believe, rather than how they act. Would they be satisfied with someone running the payroll department,
Right,
who thought math operated that way? So where, instead of getting $4 an hour, let's say, they're only being paid $3 an hour because that is their view of math. Would they buy that?
Or if they want 2 + 2 = 5, is it okay when your doctor bills you if he uses that kind of math?
Exactly. Right.
Or the grocery store. Sir, you bought this for $2 and that for $2. Your bill is $5 plus tax.
Right. So, how does Islam fit into this picture? Now, we've talked a little bit about naturalism, the growth of Marxism, and we want to come back to that in a moment. How does Islam fit into this picture?
And just to clarify one point too, I think Ron had mentioned something about moral relativism emerging and being laid the foundation by naturalism, and yet relativists still have their own absolutes. And I would say, yes, for those under naturalism, there still are normative ethical theories that are giving you at least normative ought kind of imperatives.
Right. Yeah.
But in the humanities, when that emerged within postmodernity, that was nearly relativistic. But you're still right that there still is a normative oughtness about what we're calling today social justice. That's not just relative. It is a command. It is an imperative. There are now blasphemy laws there. So to bracket those two secularist viewpoints, however, and the latter one has actually morphed into parts of Christendom, so it no longer needs its naturalistic host to survive on. But Islam, which emerged in the 6th century, hit their golden years, 9th through 12th centuries and so forth. They have taken some cues from neo-Marxist infiltration tactics in terms of not trying to take over like classical Marxism predicted, where there would be violent revolution, but instead looking at a more slow, methodical, patient approach to infiltrating non-coercive systems like education and religion, rather than coercively taking over government or law enforcement or military. If you take over the non-coercive elements, you'll also take over the other coercive elements will simply fall. Well, so the Muslims learned from the revolutionary or neo-revolutionary tactics of the neo-Marxists, and that was a slow, methodical infiltration approach to getting into positions of power where they really have no option to do a violent revolution. And so they try to get into education, into government, into religion, and they get a nice covering. Islam means peace and so forth. And, Islamic countries, many of them, the Saudis in particular, are spending billions of dollars for Muslim student associations on university campuses. And those campuses are oftentimes benefiting from the rise of the new emperor, so to speak, claiming or classifying themselves as a minority or a minoritized group, and getting sympathy from many people while they're in their process of infiltrating the education system and levels of government.
Now does this explain, just a quick question here, does this explain, I mean, you look at people like Omar, Ilhan, and Tlaib, or I forget how to pronounce her name. They're Muslims, right? Both of them, or just one?
I know Omar. I don't know if the other one is.
Well, you take her. She is constantly spewing a lot of this, critical race theory stuff, which I don't think would go over too well in a Muslim country.
Yeah, I mean, look, we only have to look at Chechnya, or part of the reasons for the Russian breakup, where a significant amount of the population in those areas, in those regions, were Muslim. Marxism and Islam they exact the whole of you. They are state building worldviews. Sharia law and Marxism are state building worldviews. They cannot compromise at the end of the day. And so they really cannot coexist. Well, the way that they've done so in the United States is because of the idea that the enemy of my enemy is my friend. And the enemy in the West has been the hegemonic power, if we can use the critical theoretical narrative, of Christianity, with all of its discourse of oppression of minoritized groups. And so they both tend to play on the sympathies of a Christian ethos of admitting guilt to sin, of being opposed to oppression, and wanting to love your neighbor as yourself. Hate or celebrate, which will it be? Are you racist or anti-racist? We've even got many people saying that you're racist if you're Islamophobic, and yet Islam is not a race. Right. But it's because they confuse and they conflate categories because they're operating with the neo-Marxist tactics of cultural engagement and cultural revolution, the soft revolutionary approach.
Right. So we have Islam and neo-Marxism / Marxism as sort of uncomfortable bedfellows, if you will, allies in overcoming Christianity for sure, and the United States in the process, although they are distinctly different. Christianity and the United States are different entities even. So they are allied in that attempt. Now we have a couple of interesting things. One is on the one hand, in order to really inculcate themselves into culture, the CRT movement thrives on outrage. They start what they call protest, but somehow buildings get burned down and looted and pillaged, and people are hurt and cars are, set on fire. Outrage is like key to what they're doing. And if they look around and they don't seem to find enough of it, they have to create it. And so we have a product that kind of addresses that, I think.
I was talking without my mic. Sorry.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We actually, it's almost like a game with them, you might say.
Yeah, it is.
Right?
It's kind of like a game with them. Yeah, as a matter of fact. It is.
Yeah, it's like a game. And so we have a question. Have those boring family dinners become unbearably tedious for you? Do you wonder when someone will invent a board game that gives your life a real purpose? Do you want to be part of something bigger than yourself while remaining the center of your universe? Then we have just what you're looking for. Where's the Outrage? The game where the woke shall inherit the earth, unless, of course, they're white males. And where's the outrage? There are no unfair inequality promoting dice. The rules for taking turns are simple. Each player gets points for being in an oppressed group, and turns are taken in the order of the most points. Next, you choose a bankroller, also known as the game's George Soros. George Soros distributes the game cards, and you're ready to play. Each player chooses a game piece and places it in the forward space. So here we have Briannold, who is an African-American, Native American, non-binary, transgender, former female, whose pronouns are Marx, Engels, and Lenin. And Briannold decides that Briannold, Marx, Engels, Lenin, I don't know how you work this, goes to the Christian-owned bakery where Briannold selects a free lawyer's card and camps out and occupies the bakery. Now, Briannold is now free to take another move. And if Briannold should end up, let's say, in the free speech zone, she can just Briannold, that is, can just blow off those fascist white supremacists and their stupid free speech with an entitlements card. And the fun is just beginning in Where's the Outrage, the game where the woke shall inherit the earth. Unless, of course, they're white males. So, and that's from the Real McCoy Gaming Company.
Real McCoy, MCOY. Real McCoy.
Yeah. So yeah, it's if you know the rules, they talk about language games. Well, we have outrage games now.
Right. So we have an interesting thing happening.
Really right now, he looks like. Let me think about this. I don't think I want to play that game.
I may need to go find my puppy.
Yeah.
You may have to find your puppy. The problem is you're playing the game whether you like it or not.
Right. I think one Greek philosopher said something to that effect. You may not take an interest in politics, but it takes an interest in you.
Interest in you, exactly. So we have a kind of an interesting turn of events on our side of the playing field. We're talking about uncomfortable bedfellows and partners between Islam and Marxism. We have seen in the last few months, especially, a sort of an interesting change in the attitude of atheists who are fighting against the faith. Richard Dawkins, for example, came out and said, you got to be a little careful because the nanny you had, at least you knew, but the nanny you have coming may not be all that good.
Well, and this is the thing, the recognition that the moral infrastructure that's been holding society together, the glue, has been largely created by Christianity, Judeo-Christian worldview.
That's right.
Right. Tom Holland, I mean, his new book is coming out, just came out, and that's exactly what he's saying, is going, you know what? I'm still an atheist. He calls himself a Christian atheist, but we need Christianity because Christianity is what has civilized the world and made it livable even for atheists. And we now have, with critical race theory, yourself and some others that have made these sort of interesting alliances with what were formerly the new atheists, James Lindsay and Peter Boghossian. Boghossian is still an atheist, as far as I know. Lindsay is now identifying as an agnostic. Mm-hmm. Why is that? Why have these alliances between solid Christian leadership and atheists/agnostics come into play?
Yeah, I'm aware that Lindsay has started identifying himself as an agnostic when he used to be an atheist. And Peter Boghossian, on his tour with me, he and I toured several universities together on viewpoint diversity, talking about the intellectual death of the university. He would respond to the audience by saying, I'm not really an atheist. I just lack sufficient evidence. And okay, so are you really an agnostic? He just doesn't want to, own that term much anymore, even though he is an atheist and he wrote the book, A Manual for Creating Atheists. but he has said that he has finished his term on fighting Christianity. He's dedicating the rest of his energies to destroying social justice and critical theory. And it's because of what you're talking about, in a nice article that he did on from the American Mind, Welcome to Culture War 2.0, I think. He sees 1.0 was the culture war that terminated with Obergefell. The second one he's looking at is now this takeover by social justice or cultural Marxism or critical theory or whatever you want to call it. I told him I actually see 1.0 is when naturalism assumed control of the universities, 1880 to 1930. This is 2.0. I'll agree with him on that, which is cultural Marxism, critical theory, social justice, and so forth. And in this new great realignment, as he's calling it, he sees, many liberal atheists like himself aligned more closely with conservative or libertarian type Christians like myself than they do with other atheists. He told me when I tried to get him to invite the non-theist groups to the campuses we were lecturing at, he said, "Are you kidding me? None of them would help me. They won't lift a door handle to help me. They all hate me. They're all woke." And in the context of speaking of him and Dawkins and Harris and other neo-atheists, he said, "We have lost the war within atheism." And he said, "If you go, we go. If we go, you go." Right. Christianity needs to stand up right now, and it's not.
And of course, right. Actually, the truth is if the atheists go, theoretically, the atheists are, in reality, we know the atheists are not going anywhere. The liberal atheists that Lindsay and Bogazian represent, they just have to go underground. I don't know what he means by "you go," because as far as we're concerned, as the church, the gates of hell shall not prevail against us. We might be driven underground, but we're not going anywhere.
Yeah, his point is, ironically, and I've got a new piece of evidence for this. Not only was I disinvited from one campus ministry over the last year, boycotted by another one when I was with Bogosian in Utah, but I was just disinvited last week from a Christian seminary who decided that the dean had prayed and heard from God that only the critical race theorist proponent was to come, and they were not to hear both sides.
I want to take a stand here now.
Crazy.
I want to take a stand here. I'm leaving it up to you, but I think you should name all these people.
There's reasons that I won't right now because there are pieces in the puzzle that are still trying to work from the inside, and I value their attempts at reforming from within.
At some point, we would like to have you back on specifically for the purpose of if it hasn't resolved itself. I would like to invite you back on. We would like to have back on anyway.
I definitely would, because we're all about dealing factually with what's going on. In fact, as you know, we've done this book, Richard Rohr and the Enneagram Secret, and something that Marcia Montenegro and I have been working on, and we have it publicly available, is currently there are over 200 colleges and universities that have the Enneagram in some form in their institutions. People need to know that before they go there.
Yeah.
So it's important. Who are the players?
Yeah. Now, well, unfortunately, if I were to do that and name institutions that had at least token representatives who were woke in one of these many ways in critical theory, I'd be here for quite a long time. It would be easier to name those that don't.
Yeah.
That's the major problem.
I'm just thinking of the ones that are rejecting you personally. Yeah.
So phase two, you could start guessing, and I would probably be saying I will neither deny nor confirm. But it's, Christian parents, if they're going to send their kids to a secular university, are foolish if they don't acknowledge that there is a problem there, and that secularists have found a brilliant way to get Christian parents to pay for the apostasy of their own children. It's called the universities. Right. Well, now it's not just the secular universities. It was that strategic retreat, you might say, phase 2, when the Bible college movement got started, when we had to give up the Harvards and Princetons and Yales and Columbias and started with, Biola and Moody and other schools. Now, most of our Christian institutions are seeing the cracks and the fissures happening in their foundations, and it's phase 2. It's postmodernism, it's critical theory, social justice,
Right.
and in particular, probably vying back and forth between, human sexuality and race. Right now, probably race is back on top of that, exploiting those Christian sensitivities to ethics for justice, as they call it. So it's
Sure.
a brand new kind of view of justice, one that they co-opt and they bastardize essentially. And it's where now you're getting, liberal atheists like Peter Boghossian and myself and many others that are finding that, at least we had traditional rules of engagement like discourse, debate, dialogue. Voltaire, who said, I may disagree with what you say, but I will go to the death to defend your right to say it.
You didn't intend to include yourself in the number of liberal atheists like Peter Boghossian.
That's right. No, I'm conservative or libertarian conservative as a Christian.
But you raise an interesting question, because I know Michael O'Fallon over at Sovereign Nations Southern Baptist has developed a friendship with Peter Boghossian and James Lindsay, and Corey, you have traveled with Peter Boghossian. Would you say you also developed a friendship with him? And how does a friendship with an atheist work?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I'll probably, I was just talking with him last week, and I'll probably actually be with him in Danger Zone, Portland, Oregon, next month when I'm back there. And we're already scheming for doing a tour in Texas. So I reconnoitered some campuses there already as soon as COVID opens up. So yeah, I've been able to get to know him a bit more, some about his family, and we've had some atheist, theist, debates back and forth personally in the car rides and hanging out together. But it was interesting that we could defend one another in various ways during our events. I mean, one university tried to get us shut down by writing a letter to the president and calling us logical fascists. So yes, and there is a sense in which, we do have a lot in common. I told him point blank, I think, this is his fault, his ilk's fault for, the naturalist takeover and creating this lab where this bacteria could just, or this virus could morph and emerge as this Frankenstein that they can no longer control. But we'll go ahead and partner together in the same way that the enemy of my enemy is my friend, because we realize that in the future, we will not even be able to have debates like we want to with each other, because debate is hate.
Right. Now, one thing I want to just take a step back just for a moment. I'm intrigued by your selection of the dates, 1880 to 1930. Is that the way, where naturalism, you would say that's when it took root, or?
That's when the famous battles happened. The dust was settling by 1930, but
so I think that what's instructive for us in that, I agree with your dates, and what I think is particularly instructive is that the Origin of Species was published in 1859. So we're talking 21 years between that and its full-fledged takeover of higher education. In other words, it didn't happen overnight. Not everybody bought into Darwin right away, including, biologists, paleontologists, archaeologists, all these people. It wasn't an overnight success, but it did take over. It brewed for about 20 years, and then it was set, okay? Likewise, when you look at the next movement, what comes after naturalism? That was brewing under the surface until finally it takes over. So my question is, what's brewing right now? What's next? Because it's already here, whatever it is. 20 years from now.
So in the history of philosophy, it's interesting how in the West things have corresponded almost to the three main branches of philosophy: metaphysics or reality, epistemology or theories of knowledge, and then ethics, right and wrong, good and evil. And we ask these questions as philosophers in that particular order. What is real? How do I know what is real? How should I then live based on what I know about reality? And modernity began with Descartes, who we say he got the cart before the horse, and it was all about the search for certainty. And its focus was on epistemology, no longer first philosophy, as Aristotle called it, or metaphysics. And Descartes was a believer, but and the father of geometry, but he wanted absolute certainty, like a geometric truth, for anything if it's to be constituted as knowledge. And at the time, they were all about, focusing on human reason and away with divine revelation, or at least, put it on the back burner. And there were two camps that vied for authority at that time: the rationalists, like Descartes, Spinoza, and Leibniz, and the empiricists like Locke, Berkeley, and Hume. 4 of the 6 of them were believers. But they followed schools of thought like Aristotle versus Plato, and Kant tried to synthesize the two. He culminates the Enlightenment, or the modernist period, and gave us agnosticism. He failed. It was a failure of a project, and we remember Kant by "you can't know ultimate reality," right? And so from that time, various different schools have begun. Scientism on the one end, and postmodernism on the other end, idealism, existentialism, and things like that. You got to a point where a philosopher named Alasdair MacIntyre, who wrote a book, by the way, Marxism and Christianity, because he was Marxist at one time, he wrote a book called After Virtue. And in that book, I think it was chapter 7, he said, look, we're at the point in our history where ideologically we've gotten to the end of our rope. Either we go back for an objective ground for ethics like Aristotle, or we just buy Nietzsche, the will to power.
Right.
Someone introduced him to Thomas Aquinas. He never heard of Aquinas. He
Really?
converted and became a Catholic, retired from Notre Dame. And he loved Aquinas from that point on. But at that point, the question was, where do we go? What idea is next? And there is a sense in which, Peter Boghossian would say, this is unsustainable. It can't last for very much longer. And I say back to him, you've not been in Christendom recently. You're still in, the atheist ivory tower, because it's just beginning to take root. It has not even closely reached its apex in Christendom.
Right.
So what is next? That's a great question. There are many ideologies that are brewing, but again, these are the 4 major idea movements around the globe: Islam, Christianity, Marxism, and
naturalism.
If you look at, is this just a redux of the French Revolution?
Some call it not postmodernism, but hypermodernism.
Yeah, but I'm saying you went through the Enlightenment, you ended up in chaos, and then you ended up with Napoleon. In other words, and this is pretty much what Francis Schaeffer said too.
Yeah.
We're going to end up. Eventually, the chaos will demand. Society can't. That's the unsustainable part. Is the chaos. And I'm interested that you picked your when you picked those 3 branches of philosophy, talking about how they invaded, metaphysics, epistemology, and ethics. Or you didn't mention aesthetics, but anyways, it reminded me of Schaeffer's staircase. First the change takes place in philosophy. I don't know, where was religion? Did he have religion on the staircase or not? I don't know. But then it went down to the arts, and then I'm trying to remember the next. This is Escape from Reason, where I read it first.
Aesthetics is actually part of value theory. It's part of ethics as a major branch.
Oh, okay. So
let's take because we are over time, like we always are over time. But we'll take just a few minutes, because this impacts how you approach campus ministry, and I think in a sort of a microcosm that might be instructive to help church leadership understand how do you approach it as a church in your neighborhood, in your town, in your I've told it. Ron knows the story. I wear my faith on my sleeve. I always have done that. And I would have, like you, I have had friends with atheists and even gays and different. And sometimes I would get a call from one of them who would say something like, are you still a Bible banger? And I would go, yes. And I was in construction. Good. I have a client I want to recommend you to, and I wanted to know if you were still trustworthy. So at that time, Christianity was still held to some esteem, at least by the ones I knew. We were friends. We would debate about issues. We clearly didn't agree on them, but I affirmed their right to be an unbeliever, and they appreciated my defense of the faith. How does that play itself out in today's culture and campus ministry? And how should church leadership think about how do we train our people? Because churches are now mission societies. They are no longer just places to gather as believers.
Yeah, so to begin with campus ministry, I do think the university still is the fulcrum. What we're seeing in culture now, this revolution that's taking place, was already there. This is downstream, and if you want to clean up the pollution downstream, you've got to go upstream, where they're the gatekeepers of ideas. So we need to continue focusing on the university for evangelism, but like the not George Marsden, the two tasks of the Christian scholar, the old Secretary General of the UN. It was a title of a talk.
George Muller?
No, I'm spacing the name right now.
Okay.
But he was the Secretary General of the UN. He gave a talk at Wheaton College on the two tasks of the Christian scholar: redeeming the soul, redeeming the mind. We need to continue with evangelism there, but we also need to exhibit the mind of Christ, if anywhere, at the universities. We need to reclaim the intellectual voice of Christ at the universities. It's the, especially including the professors. I think it's the 1040 window of the Western world. It is the greatest omission of the Great Commission if we fail to reach the professors. We're just handing them our children. We need to put more Christians into the pipeline to get back on the beaches of Normandy, to have exposure to the mainland and be able to have some control there. Right now, we're just on the outside, and all we've got is the church, not the media, not government, not the universities, or even education, even the K through 12, who are all educated from the teachers from the universities. So the church needs to wake up and become seriously woke about the most strategic mission in the world, and that is the university. That's where secularists have, found a way to get Christian parents to pay for the apostasy of the church's children. But the church needs to start equipping its own people to be thinking about worldview and apologetics evangelism. That's what Ratio Christi's DNA is: apologetics evangelism, evangelistic apologetics, or apologists. You can't do evangelism very much anymore on university campuses if you don't at least have apologetics in your tool chest. And in the churches, increasingly, you are in a culture that has, as Ron said, it's sort of come out from the universities, and now it's mainstream, and you're seeing it everywhere. You've got to be able to, we've been in Mars Hill for quite some time. That's how we lost the millennials. It's not that, this is just one generation, Gen Z. No, we were already there, and we were thinking, like Paul was going into the synagogues. We were thinking our culture was still the synagogues, and that's where we missed the millennials. We were already on Mars Hill a generation ago. And so it's not as if we're going to lose, Gen Z if we don't change our tactics. We've already lost them. Right. It's whether we're going to lose an entire 2 generations and lose an entire platform of cognitive liberty and free speech, an entire country that's been the global influencer of thoughtful Christianity and, frankly, of world missions to the third world.
Right. So, we're back to education. And fundamentally, as we go through Scripture, that's what we see laid out regularly and clearly. Make a defense for the faith. 1 Timothy, 2 Timothy, equip the laity. Make sure the elders actually understand the faith and can defend it. Pass it on from one generation to the next generation. I have looked in vain, and maybe you have found a secret passage somewhere that says The task of the church is to figure out ways to better market to unbelievers to get them into our seeker-sensitive services so we can sneak up on them with the gospel. It may be there, but I haven't found it anywhere.
Yeah, and that new fad is no longer, skinny jeans and fog machines. It's now social justice.
Right. That's right. So, all right. Those who want to get in touch with you, again, the Ratio Christi information is in the description and the bottom, but maybe you can let them know if they wanted to contact you or Ratio Christi directly, and they don't want to go and look at our little description panel for fear of running into the donate link. How would they do that?
Sure. If they want to see my article, how we lost the universities, they can just Google that. But if they want to go to ratiochristi.org, RATIOCHRISTI.org, you can look us up, contact us, join our movement. We're on 125 campuses, international as well, trying to reach professors, trying to reach high school students as well. But on 125 campuses out of 5,000 in this country, we've not scratched the surface,
right.
And we need help. We can do bigger things and better things together.
Right. That's absolutely true. All right. And what was the name of that article again? I'll go get it and put it in the description field.
Oh, how we lost the universities. Just Google how we lost the universities, Corey Miller, and it'll bring it up.
Okay. Sounds great.
All right. If you can hold on for a second and be miserable, because we're going to have some fun as we close this out, and Ron is going to walk us out of here.
I sure am. Resident cult leader profiler is Neil before me. Our wardrobe manager is See How It Fits You. Our culinary services come from Chef Ham and Cheese. Our tinfoil hat provisioner is Just In Case. Our Jehovah's Witnesses coverage is provided by Armageddon and D. Opposer. Our Mormon Archives manager is Polly Gummas. Our Liberal Denominations Bureau Chief is Lucy Goosey. Our transgender issues coverage comes from Ben Hur. Our special correspondent for cults based on the Hindenburg disaster and flying turkeys. Oh, dehumanity. Our fact-checking supervisor is Joe Pulling. Our technical assistance comes through Murky Research. Our legal advisors are at the law firm of Dewey, Cheatham, and Howe. Our grievance resolution director is Giovanna Pisa-Me. Our director of privacy assurance is Wiretapping. And our original idea sourcing comes from Drew A. Blank. The Unknown Webcast is a production of Midwest Christian Outreach, Inc. in cooperation with Emergency Manicure Productions, both of whom are solely responsible for this content, although you will never be able to prove that in a court of law.
Never happened. Corey, I thank you so much for being here. If you could hold on a second as we close this out, I want to talk to you just for a moment afterwards.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate the time together.
Hasta la vista, baby.
Hasta la vista, babies.